Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host. I am tickled to death that you decided to join me today. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to do everything we can to make this investment of your time worth your while. Now, today I have an excellent featured conversation for you with small business finance coach Lauren Rilling. If you own your tour company, or if you are wondering whether you should turn your group travel hobby into a business, this is an interview you simply can't afford to miss. Lauren is going to give you some of the key financial things you need to think about when deciding whether to launch out as a travel business. She's got tips about managing cash flow in what can be a very seasonal industry, as well as ideas about how you can prioritize profit and pay yourself a decent wage. You definitely want to hear this conversation. Before we get there, though, let's start with some travel news you may have missed. The new federal budget law could have significant impacts on tourism. Though it's most recognized for high-profile tax and budgetary policy changes, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed into law by President Trump, contains several provisions that could have lasting ramifications for the travel industry. The new law calls for an overhaul of America's aging air traffic control system, and that has been widely praised by tourism leaders. But other components of the law could serve to dampen inbound tourism to the United States, which has already fallen precipitously in 2025. The law nearly doubled fees on inbound travelers from visa waiver countries, raising the total from $21 to $40 per traveler, and introduced a new $250 fee for visitors from non-waiver countries. In response to the law's signing, U.S. Travel Association CEO Jeff Freeman said, quote, "Raising fees on lawful international visitors amounts to a self-imposed tariff on one of our nation's largest exports, international travel spending. Those fees are not reinvested in improving the travel experience and do nothing but discourage visitation at a time when foreign travelers are already concerned about the welcome experience and high prices." The One Big Beautiful Bill Act also slashed funding of Brand USA, America's tourism promotion organization, by 80%. Well, now it's time for the road tip segment of our show. This is the part of every episode where we dig deep into our bag of travel knowledge from decades on the road and bring you tips to make your next trip less stressful and more successful. I just got back from a family vacation. We went on a road trip from our home in Kentucky down to a beach vacation in the Florida Panhandle, and we decided to drive this time for various reasons. It was about a 10.5-hour drive each way. And I was so proud of how well my kids did on the road trip. Now, one of the reasons that they might have done so well was because I was what my wife and kids like to refer to as vacation dad. They seem to think that when we go on vacation, some switch flips inside my brain and I turn into this fun-loving guy who isn't concerned about money or calories or bedtimes and just lets everybody live their best life. They're probably right about that. But one of the things I do love to do on road trips is make sure everybody has plenty of snacks. And I was thinking about this once I got back to the office and realized, this could be a great strategy not only for vacation dad on a family road trip, but also for a group travel planner. Now, you have certainly thought about bringing snacks on the motor coach before, especially for long drives. I'm a big proponent of this. We certainly do it anytime we host an on-site familiarization trip. So I thought for today's road tip, I would give you some things to keep in mind as you are trying to find the perfect snack to give your travelers on the motor coach or however you're traveling over a long stretch of road. So 5 things you want to look for in the perfect snack. Number 1, this is pretty obvious, but you want items that are non-perishable. We would all love to think that ourselves and our travelers just want to eat fresh fruits and vegetables and really healthy, yummy things when we travel. Of course, we all know that's not what we really want. And even if we did really want that, they just don't work well for travel. They are perishable. They can go bad On a bus, they get overripe. They don't do well in the heat. So the ideal snack really needs to be something that is non-perishable, that is going to do really well in that sort of environment. You also want to look for something that's not temperature sensitive. I have definitely made this mistake before. I've seen other travel planners make it too, of saying, let's treat everybody on the bus and get a big bag of candy to share. And then they don't realize that that candy is going to melt, even if it's not a particularly hot day. The way the sun comes through those motor coach windows, it causes heat on board the coach, which can melt that candy. And that makes a big mess. You don't want a big mess on your hands. There are also snacks that don't do necessarily well in cold temperatures. So you want to make sure whatever you're handing out does well in both heat and cold. It's not subject to melting or freezing. Along those same lines, you want to look for something that is not messy. There are a few feelings less comfortable than having a great snack on the motor coach or anywhere else, and finishing with a little bit of crumbs or residual oil or something like that on your hands, and feeling like you have nowhere to wipe it, and you have to go through the next little segment of your day with dirty or greasy hands. Nobody wants that. So you're looking for snacks that are not messy. You want something that is individually packaged. This makes it much easier to hand out to everybody as they need it, as they want it. It also cuts down on any kind of disease transmission or germs or things like that you definitely don't want going around the motor coach on your trip. Finally, you're looking for something craveable. Nobody wants dried fruit. I'm just going to say it. I know it's the healthy option. I know it's what we all should want, but nobody wants dried fruit. Nobody wants dried kale. Nobody wants something that would be approved by their nutritionist. They want something salty, or they want something sweet. So if you want to thrill your travelers, you want to look for those craveable snacks. So what are some things that fit all those categories? Well, for me, individually portioned packages of almonds are great. I like almonds better than peanuts because they are less greasy and fewer people tend to have almond allergies. I also love Cheez-Its, like a baked cracker. Cheez-Its have lots of flavor, a good salty, cheesy punch. They don't make the mess that something like Cheetos make. But for me, the all-time number one road trip snack, and I don't care if you disagree, the all-time number one road trip snack is Fig Newtons. If you are sitting there thinking, I haven't seen a Fig Newton since the 1970s, well, let me tell you, you are missing out. You better believe I bought 2 sleeves of Fig Newtons for the family vacation road trip. They are my favorite, and I love them, and you will never convince me otherwise. That is your road tip of the week. Now, before we move on, I want to take just a minute and give you a little bit of news from us. Hopefully by now you are familiar with our on-site familiarization tour program. That is a program where we work with destinations around the US and sometimes around the world to host familiarization trips for travel planners just like you. Now, I have a brand new fam trip opportunity to tell you about. I am excited to let you in on this one. We are going to Alabama September 30th through October 4th. I am going to be on that trip. I can't wait to get back to some of my favorite places in Alabama and see them again. I can't wait to see some of you guys on that trip as well. If you join us, you are going to get to visit Huntsville, Muscle Shoals, and Birmingham. You're going to see highlights like the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. I get to tour some of the studios in Muscle Shoals where some of the most legendary artists of the 20th century recorded their hits. And we're going to visit the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, among many, many other places. Now, we would love to have you join us for this, fam. All you need to do to get that ball rolling is to apply today on our website at grouptravelleader.com/Alabama-fam. And don't worry, I'll put that link in the show notes to make it easy to get to. Fill out an application there, and the sooner you apply, the better your chances of grabbing one of the limited spots that we have for this trip. And as always, you can find a listing of all our available fam trip opportunities, as well as overviews of many of the dozens and dozens of fams we've done in the past. You can get some great itinerary ideas from those past trips. You can find all of that on our website at grouptravelleader.com/fams. Well, it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Lauren Rilling. And hey, if you are more of a visual person, if you like watching interviews and podcasts on YouTube, well, you can see our entire conversation and both of our lovely faces on our YouTube channel. Just go over to YouTube and search for Gather and Go. You can also find the full video of this interview on the show notes page for this episode. That's available at grouptravelleader.com/podcast. Find this episode and the video will be embedded right there in the page. And hey, after the interview, I'm going to do a quick wrap up of some of the most important things Lauren had to say. And I want to encourage you to stick around to the end of that wrap up, because after that, I want to talk a little bit about the spiraling cost of attending tourism conferences in 2025. That's going to be the subject of today's Hot Minute. You won't want to miss that. We'll be right back with Lauren Rilling. All right, everybody. My guest today is a business finance coach who has been helping owners master their cash flow and maximize profit for more than a decade. She specializes in using time-tested financial principles to help clients achieve their professional and personal goals with more clarity and less stress. Lauren Rilling, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Brian. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I am so glad to have you here. You and I have been friends for a while, and I always enjoy hearing your insights about managing your cash flow and generating profit for small business owners. So I'm excited to share that with our travel audience today. Before we start, though, you have a personal connection to travel. It's a lot of fun. Your dad worked in travel when you grew up. Tell us about that experience, what it was like spending time in his company, and maybe how that affected the way you came to see business.
Yeah, that's a fun memory because my dad managed a boutique travel agency for over 40 years. And so when I was a little kid, I remember going into his office and helping him print people's airline tickets. Back when airline tickets, you would call your travel agent and you would say, book your travel, book everything with the travel agent, not on the internet. And there's a special printer and special paper for these airline tickets. And so I would help print them out and bring them to my dad from the back office. And I just remember the sound of the printer because it was kind of like screechy and had this very unique tone to it. And then the paper was like this thick, glossy cardboard. And it was just so fun to get to have that be part of my childhood memory. But then also as I grew up, I started helping out in the office. And so that was actually my first job when I was 16, was doing research assistant work and just like secretarial work for the travel agency. And I did that all through college as well and helped plan vacations. So it was a really big part of my, early professional development.
Yeah. Did that exposure to small business kind of spark something in you or make you think, hey, this is a group of people that I would maybe see myself serving one day?
Oh, for sure. Because first of all, travel is just so much fun. Right. But then also you're having conversations about the customer experience, how you can create value. When the internet really started taking over in the, late 90s, probably with travel, there were all these conversations about, oh no, is the travel agency going to go out of business? What are you guys going to do? And I just remember my dad being like, it's not a problem. That's totally irrelevant to us because we know that the value we provide for people is not transactional. It's not about just printing someone's airline tickets. It's about creating these amazing itineraries and helping people to have an amazing vacation, that they can't get that by booking a trip online.
Yeah.
And so he really knew what his niche was and where the value was that they were bringing. And that was something that I think I learned, as a kid, that really just always stuck with me. So yeah, I think it definitely influenced my view on business and my interest in business as well.
Yeah. That's amazing because now 30 years later, everything he said is still absolutely as true as it was in the 90s. It's not about the transactions. It's about the expertise, about the service, the value, all those things. I love that perspective. So I want to ask you a bunch of questions about cash flow, about profitability, about managing business finances. And we have an audience of people across the spectrum in the travel industry, from folks who are kind of just dabbling in it, doing it for fun, all the way to people who run fairly sophisticated operations. And I think there are pain points at many of those points along the spectrum. So I want to start at that sort of enthusiast end of the spectrum, the people who are leading group trips for fun. Maybe they got 30 or 40 friends that they plan a trip for 2 or 3 times a year, and they have started to think, I wonder if I could do this as a business, because they maybe make a little bit of money at the end of the trip, or they have dreams of starting a business like so many people do. So what would you tell them as they think through those dreams, as they ask those questions? What are some of the steps that they should be taking, things they should be thinking about when they consider, is this a hobby, or can I turn this into a business that could actually be my career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there are a lot of financial considerations, and you can really figure out what your expected profit will be ahead of time or as you're going. You don't have to take big financial risks, which is always helpful because it's a service-based business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need a lot of capital to get started. You don't need a fancy office space. If you can keep I would say one thing is, if you can keep your operating overhead really, really low at first, you don't need to go spend $20,000 on a fancy website, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not why that's not what gets people to book with you right now.
Yeah.
Right? It's because you're offering something amazing. So know what that is and don't depart from that. Stay really focused on what it is that you offer that's really amazing, and find ways to make that experience even better.
Yeah.
Keep your overhead low. The second thing is, know what your profit margins are. Start calculating your costs. So if you know that you offer like a 5-day bicycle tour, for example, start keeping track of your costs for that particular tour. Even just on a simple spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then know what you're charging people, so that way you can go, okay, how much in revenue did we collect? How much were the costs? And then the remaining amount is your gross profit. And gross profit is everything when it comes to tour companies, at least.
Yeah.
So knowing your costs associated with each trip that you're planning will really help you know how much you need to charge for these trips as well.
Yeah, that's such good advice. A couple things that I'm sure you would agree with as well is, like, don't run this out of your personal checking account, right? Like, you definitely need a business account.
Yes. Open up a business account. Keep everything separate. Do not put personal expenses on the business credit card or vice versa. Commingling funds just makes it an accounting mess, and you're going to spend a lot of money having someone untangle that for you. So keep business expenses with the business account, personal expenses with the personal account. If you're going to take some money out of your business account for an owner draw while you're first getting started, transfer it from the business account to your personal account, or write a check out of that account so that you can clearly see this was owner's compensation or a personal expense, and it's not all getting mixed up.
Yeah. So you mentioned, keeping a spreadsheet, keeping track of transfers. At what point does somebody who's, dabbling and making a little bit of money, what point do they need to think about accounting software or a bookkeeper, or how much does it matter to keep track of every dollar you spend? Or if you're profitable, is it good enough to just, keep doing the fun part of the work?
No, I would say that the sooner you get proper accounting set up, the better. Because if you don't, you're going to spend more money to get it cleaned up later. So as soon as you decide this is a business, get a bookkeeper, and you can get a basic subscription for QuickBooks Online. It's like $30 a month. It's a nominal fee. But you do want a bookkeeper. And one of the biggest mistakes I see business owners make is thinking that they can manage their own bookkeeping. But bookkeeping is a lot more. And I don't do bookkeeping because I don't like it. But bookkeeping is a lot more than clicking numbers and just recording transactions. There's a whole accounting process to it, and you need someone who does understand accounting. Otherwise, you're going to end up paying more in taxes or getting in trouble with the IRS. Just make sure it's being done right from the very beginning. And you're going to save yourself a lot of money. And you're also going to have good financial records so that you can use that information to make profitable decisions for your business.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is in the startup phase, you don't need to spend money on an office. You don't need to spend it on a website. It may be a good idea to spend it on proper bookkeeping.
Absolutely. Get those unglamorous systems in place. And that's going to be a lot more, impactful in terms of the success of your business. Once you're generating profit, then get the website, start putting some money into, social media marketing or advertising. But right now, you're already doing a good enough job that people are coming back to you or referring friends and family. So ask them to write you reviews on Google, ask them to tag you on your Instagram. All of those things make a big difference. Ask them to incentivize referrals.
Yeah.
Those things are free or cheap.
Yeah.
So you've already proven your concept. You've already proven that you're successful, that you're doing something really great for someone else, that there's value there. So don't go spend a lot of money trying to bring more people in the door before you actually have the profit to grow and invest in that.
Yeah, I love that. So speaking of profit, every time I get to talk to you, I come away struck by how much of a priority you put on profit in business. You are kind of a proponent of the profit first approach to business. Explain what that means and how an entrepreneur, at the startup phase or maybe in the middle phase of growth, can sort of onboard that into the way that they operate.
Mm-hmm. And I would say even the principles and ideas that we just talked about for a startup, it really doesn't matter what stage of business you're in. If you're thinking, "Ooh, I'm already making $1 million a year in revenue, but I haven't done some of these things," just go do them now. Like, it's not too late.
Yeah.
You didn't miss the boat, but take care of them now. Or maybe you go through your business budget and you go, "Ooh, maybe we don't need to spend, maybe we're spending too much on overhead and we could really trim some of that down." Because every dollar that you spend is a dollar that is not profit. You're right. I am a really big fan of Profit First. That's a cash flow management system by Mike Michalowicz, and he wrote a book called Profit First that I love. But the idea of Profit First, I was kind of turned off by it at the beginning because I thought, well, isn't that greedy? Like, why should we be thinking about profit first? Shouldn't we be thinking about serving others first? Because that's a value of mine. But actually, profit first, the idea of it is that when you're designing your business plan, you have to think about profit as being the goal and not the leftover outcome. So when you think about profit, we're thinking about how much can you actually afford to pay yourself? How much can you save to have an emergency fund for the business? How much can you save to pay your employees a bonus? How much can you set aside to make sure that you have taxes covered so that there's no surprises? How much can you save so that you can grow and try new things and expand without putting your business at unnecessary risk? That's what we say when we mean profit first. All of those, the ability to do all of those things comes from your profit, not from your revenue.
Yeah, key difference there. Now, I can hear a lot of our listeners saying, "But Lauren, I have no idea how much money I'm going to make from one tour to another." And there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of them is that, if somebody's chartering a full motor coach and they sell 15 seats on that tour, that's a very different amount of revenue than if they charter that same coach but sell 45 seats on that tour. So, how does somebody in a variable revenue situation like that kind of account for that variability in, planning a profit first cash flow philosophy?
That's a really good question because we can't predict or control everything, right? I always say life doesn't exist on a spreadsheet. You can have an amazing financial model, but it's never going to work out perfectly according to the model. And that's okay. We don't need it to. But what we do need is to know let's use the example you just gave of the stagecoach and it could be 5 people, it could be 15 people, it could be 45. We don't know. You need to know your minimums. What is the minimum requirement? So how many people at minimum do we need to sign up for this tour to make X number of dollars in profit? Therefore, based on those numbers, how much do we need to charge per person? that way, once you have your minimums, you know that anything on top of that is gravy, right?
Yeah.
It's all good from there. You're not worried about losing money. You're not worried about just breaking even. You know that if we do this trip, we have to have this many people charging this much per person, or however you price it out. And knowing that that's going to produce a certain amount of profit is going to help us to keep going and to be able to pay ourselves and to keep operations moving.
Yeah. If somebody launches a trip and puts it out there and it only is marginally successful, and they look at the numbers before the trip goes and say, oh man, I may only break even on this one. You feel like they should still run it? Or is it time to have a hard conversation with yourself and say, well, maybe we cancel this one because there's no profit?
Yeah. So breaking even means you're doing something for free.
Ouch. That really hurts.
That's not a bad thing. It's just, if it's a business, do you really want to do work for free?
Right.
If it's a hobby, then yeah, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's a business, then yeah, breaking even means you're working for free. And in business, there will be times where you lose money. There will be times when you break even. First of all, if you know that you're breaking even, that's the first step, because that means you have accurate financial data to even know that you're breaking even. Yeah. So I don't consider that as a failure. I consider that as good information, because as business owners, we always have to be thinking about business failures as just really the next stepping stone to success. Like, great, I got new information. Now what do I want to do with that information?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. So just because you launch a tour that doesn't go well doesn't mean you're failing as a tourism business owner.
No, you have to try things. Of course, you have to try things. You want to make sure you have the cash and the saved profit to try new things and to take new risks. That's why I love setting goals for profit, because if you know that you're going to set aside 30% of your net profit every month in a savings account, that allows you to just say, hey, we've never done this tour before. We've never offered this before. We know it's going to take a little money to offer it, to pay our team, or, purchase X, Y, or Z. We don't know how it's going to go, but it could be successful. Great. Let's take that money from that saved profit account and we're taking a little business risk here, but we know we can afford it because we've set aside the money for that purpose. So if it doesn't go well, then we haven't lost anything really. We've gained knowledge about what to do next.
Yeah, I love that. So good. Another thing that is tricky for travel businesses is the seasonality of the business. Most travel operators have a certain season of the year where they do a lot of business. I don't know if it's quite as stark as like an 80-20 rule where you do, 80% of your business in 20% of the year. But, group tour operators, for example, very busy in the spring, extremely busy in the fall. Summer and winter are pretty dead. That can be really tricky when it comes to cash flow management, because it's feast or famine. You've got a lot of cash coming in sometimes and virtually no cash coming in other times. So how do you manage that cash flow in a way that makes your business work all year, even if you're not literally working all year?
Right. And if this resonates with you, if this situation resonates with you, know that you're not alone. And it is something that can be managed in a way that you don't have to be worried throughout the summer and winter.
Yeah.
What you've got to do is you've got to know, what is our overhead? What are our operating costs that are just exist no matter what? Second, how much do we need for owner pay? Because you've got to pay yourself. You want to pay yourself consistently. You don't want it to be feast or famine on a personal basis, because first of all, that's no fun not to pay yourself for 6 months out of the year.
Right.
And also, it's harder to make good, grounded decisions about the business or about your personal life if you're worried about how you're going to pay your mortgage, right? Yeah. So we want to solve that problem. And the way we do that is, first of all, by knowing how much do you need every single month for overhead, no matter what. How much money do you need? And if you can't do this, if you're saying, well, yeah, I need X amount every month for my personal expenses, just for my own, owner's pay, but I'm not there yet, that's okay. Just write down what those numbers are so that you have a goal to work toward. And let's just make up a number and say that between operating expenses and owner pay needs, that number is $20,000 a month. Okay, how do we make sure that we have consistently, at least, if we're talking about summer and winter, at least $60,000 at the end of the high season to get us through until the next high season comes in.
Yeah.
So one of the names we call it is a hill and valley fund.
Mm.
And you just kind of stash that money away instead of looking at the bank account as it grows during that high volume season and go, oh, yay, now we can finally spend money.
I'm rich.
Yeah. Don't feast because you know that there's a famine coming, right?
Right.
Set aside the amount of money you know you're going to need and then and pace it out. That way you're not making decisions based on the number that's in the bank account today. You're actually planning and budgeting and strategizing. And that's going to create a lot more consistency even when revenue is coming in inconsistently.
Yeah, great advice. You've mentioned owner pay a couple times. How does an owner know how to structure that? Do I take a salary? Do I just take a quarterly draw? Or after a successful tour, do I just kind of guess and say, well, I think I can afford to pull, $1,500 from this one or whatever? Is there a strategy that is, consistent and sustainable for owners to pay themselves?
Yeah, there are some guidelines and it is different for everyone because it really does depend on what your personal goals are. If you are doing this as more of a hobby or you're just starting up and you have another source of income, you don't need the income and your goal is to grow the business as quickly as possible, then you're going to want to take home less. So that you can invest more in the growth of the company. Nothing wrong with that. But I do want you taking home something because when we feel rewarded, we're inspired to keep going. We're motivated to keep going. So everyone should pay themselves something consistently every single month. I remember when I started my coaching business, I felt like I couldn't afford to pay myself, but it wasn't true. I felt like I needed to keep putting money back in the business. But actually what happened is once I started paying myself, I only started paying myself $1,000 a month. Like it was not a lot of money, but it made a really big difference for my family.
Yeah.
Having an extra $1,000 all of a sudden,
right.
That feels good, right?
Yeah.
And what that did is it rewarded my effort. And it also made me think really carefully about my business expenses. And it also motivated me to make more money. Not because money is like the end goal or top goal of everything, but it is really motivating and inspiring when you see like, oh, I actually am getting something out of the work that I'm doing. There's a certain point where you don't just want to take owner draws, where you actually do want to file your taxes as an S corporation. And that just simply means you're going to pay yourself a combination of salary and owner distributions. And so you do want to talk to a CPA about this, someone who's licensed to give tax advice, but there's a certain net profit amount. I'm not a CPA, I'm not giving tax advice, but a lot of CPAs will say right around the $50,000 a year in net profit mark, you're going to save more money. You're going to spend less in taxes by switching over to an S corporation. And that simply means you pay yourself as an employee of the company. So at that point, you do pay yourself a set salary every month or every 2 weeks, whatever schedule you're using. And then in addition to that, you can take owner distributions, and those distributions are not subject to payroll tax. So you're saving, a percentage on that, which if you're not an S corporation, you're not saving that money. You're paying payroll tax on all of your net profit. So it's really a matter of how big your company is, how much income you want to take home or need to take home. But across the board, I believe every single business owner should pay themselves a consistent amount every single month. And then in addition to that, take quarterly profit distribution. So based on your net profit, and whatever percentage of that net profit you have predetermined is going to be your own owner's bonus. Maybe that's 20% of your net profit every quarter. You get to take that home as a bonus and then spend it however you want. And if that quarter wasn't as good, you don't get as much reward. If it's better, you get more money, right? So that's another way I like to manage profit and set goals for profit as well.
So if somebody has a fantastic quarter, exceeds all their expectations, you still want them to take the predetermined owner draw, as opposed to saying, well, I can afford to dip a little deeper this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And over time, as you see your business grow, if you decide, you know what, my business grew by 50% this year, well, then maybe it's time to increase the salary.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't want to make decisions arbitrarily from month to month, especially because this is an industry where cash flow is up and down. So if we're trying to create more consistency and predictability, the last thing you want to do is have a fluctuating amount every month for how much you're paying yourself.
Yeah. All right. That's really, really good advice. Now, something that affects people at every point on the spectrum, but especially the bigger companies, is this issue of, in tourism, we have people pay in installments, right? So when they sign up for a tour, they're going to give us a deposit. Might be a few $100s, maybe $1,000 if it's an expensive tour. And then maybe, 2 or 3 months before the tour, there's going to be a secondary payment due. And then 30 days out, you may have a final payment. We have seen time and time again, companies with great reputations, even some big companies, some public companies, get into massive trouble by basically using those deposits to cover operating expenses for trips that they're operating right now. And then when it comes time for the next trip, they've already spent the money that their customers gave them. They don't have the cash to operate. So they get upside down. And it happens to big companies. It happens to small companies. How do you fight that temptation to dip into deposits to pay for your current operating expenses and make sure that your tour company doesn't become one of the many horror stories of this happening?
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. So here's what you want to do. Open a separate bank account just for deposits. You don't spend any money out of that deposit account. Now, once that money is earned, so say someone puts down a $5,000 deposit, depending on what your contract is, maybe 50% of that is non-refundable. You can then move $2,500 of that $5,000 into your operating account because that is earned money. You know that you've earned it. It's not going to get refunded to the customer. You're using that for your operations or whatever you need for the trip, right? But that other $2,500, if it's still refundable, you don't get to spend that yet. So it stays there. Once the money is actually earned and it is not refundable anymore, then you can move it into operating and consider that as revenue. But I wouldn't consider it as revenue until it's actually earned, not just because you have it in an account.
Yeah. Would you say that in tourism specifically, the money is earned when the trip is operated, or, can it be a little before the trip is operated? Does it have to be completely finished before it's earned?
I think it depends on your contract. So that's another reason why clear contracts are also really, really important. And you do want to have a little bit of money set aside, because there's times where you have a customer that's really, really unhappy, just every now and then, right? But it happens once in a blue moon where it's like, all right, we fulfilled our contract. You signed it. You paid us. You're not supposed to get your money back. But there may be one or two of every now and then where it's like, man, I just want to refund them and,
get them out of my life.
Kind of. Yeah. If you don't have the cash to do that at your discretion, life is a lot more stressful, right?
Yeah.
So that's another reason why you want to have money set aside and not spend money that you haven't actually earned yet. But for the most part, as long as you have clear contracts and as long as you're not spending money that you haven't actually earned yet, you're going to be in good shape. So yeah, once that final deposit is due and that money is non-refundable at that point, you don't need to keep it in a deposit account.
Yeah. But you still need to be aware of your expenses so that you're not, overspending out of that revenue to pay operating expenses so that you can't pay next month's operating expenses.
Exactly. And if you're in that spot, then we have to dig deeper and figure out what's causing that to be the problem. Is it because your prices are too low? Is it because your costs are too high? Is it because you're taking too much in owner pay, which I hate to be the bearer of bad news when that happens, but it's like, you can't take 75% of the revenue, to pay yourself, or,
Right.
Or did you not plan for taxes last year? Like, what's going on that's causing you to be behind with your cash flow so that we can really get to the issue and solve that issue.
Yeah. So let's talk about that coaching process. You work with entrepreneurs across the different kinds of industries here in the U.S. What does it look like when someone has a session with you? When they, open up their books to you? What are you helping them figure out? What are you helping them get on track? Is it just as much like emotional, psychological support as it is nuts and bolts and finances? How does that relationship develop?
Yeah, it's really both because we need good financial knowledge and we need good data to make good decisions, but results don't come from just knowing about something. Results come from action. And so it's all about, well, how do we take this financial information and do something different to get different results, to get better results? So when I start to work with a client, I want to know what their personal goals are. I want to know what is it, and I work from a model of biblical stewardship. So I want to know, what is God really put on your heart? How do you feel he's calling you to steward your business right now? What are the values that you have that you want to make sure you're in alignment with? How much, and then practical things too, just how much money do you need to take home?
Right.
And if you're already there, if you're like, hey, I have what I need, but I would like to make more. Okay, great. Let's talk about your goal number too. Mm-hmm. What are your professional goals for the business? Where do you see yourself taking this? So I want to know all of those things. And I also want to know, what are the things that are causing stress right now? So that if there's something where I don't have a magic wand, but if I did and I waved it, what would make your life so much easier? Like, if we could solve one problem in the next 6 months, what would that be? So I want to get a good idea of personal goals, business goals, what's stressing you out, what gets you excited about getting up every morning and going to work. I want to know all of those things because that gives me a really good idea of what we need to prioritize when it comes to action items, when it comes to making different decisions from an operational standpoint in the business. So finances, the money stuff really they're really indicators of operational changes to make.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So if somebody is hearing all this and saying, I need Lauren in my life like yesterday, what are the best ways for them to find you, follow you, connect with you, learn more about working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is savvystewardship.com. And you can just email me, lauren.savvystewardship@gmail.com. And I'll be more than happy to sit down with you for a complimentary consultation. We'll talk about all your goals, what's going on, and then we'll make a plan together.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll link to all of those things in the show notes. Now, I could talk to you about this all day. I know you've got other things to do, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. But before I let you go, we have some questions we ask everybody. These are just for fun. So no pressure, off the top of your head. When you book travel, do you choose a window seat or an aisle seat?
It depends on how long of a trip it is, but I usually like a window seat.
Yeah. Do you like the view or do you want something to like lay your head on?
Both. I like the window open when I travel. I feel claustrophobic when someone in the window seat closes the window.
Yeah, I feel that.
I like control over the window. That's what it is. It's a control issue.
Somebody pointed out to me the other day that's like every time you get on a plane now, everybody closes the window shades. And it didn't used to be that way. I think it's because they're all looking at their phones and don't want the glare. But we miss a little bit of that sunlight and the view and all that stuff. It's kind of a bummer.
I love the view. That's my favorite part of flying is the view. So
yeah, for sure. So what's one thing in your carry-on that you wouldn't travel without?
Ooh, probably my water bottle. Yeah. Yeah. I need to stay hydrated. I don't like just the little cups of water that they give you. I need my water bottle.
Yeah. Plus a good water bottle keeps it cold and cold water is so much better to drink. Easier to drink.
And you know what I also bring? I always bring a paperback book. That's like my thing when I travel. I like to read an actual book.
Yeah.
So I always have that too.
I'm with you for sure. If you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you be headed next?
Oh my goodness. I'd probably go to Paris right now because I studied abroad there. It's been almost 20 years and I've been wanting to go back, but I just haven't had a chance to. So if I had to decide today where I would go, I'd just go to Paris for a week.
Yeah. Well, that may tie into our last question as well. What's one thing you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
Oh, that's such a good question. When you say on the road, do you mean just away
from
wherever?
home? Yeah,
Huh?
wherever. Away from home.
Yeah, away from home. I really want to take my kids. I have 3 daughters, and I really want to take them to some different museums in Paris because they've been studying all the art stuff in school. And so I feel like they're at an age where they would actually have an appreciation for it. And so I would love to take them back to the places that I went to in college because I know that they would love it.
Yeah. Well, hey, put that on the list of goals. Start setting the
Yep.
money aside one day. That's a dream you and the girls definitely need to make happen. We'll be rooting for you to see that through.
Thanks.
Lauren, thanks so much for joining us. This has been great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. This was fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Lauren Rilling as much as I did. Lauren is such a wealth of not only information, but clarity. And she really helps bring insight and clarity and direction to an area of business and operations that can be so murky for so many travel entrepreneurs. I want to take a minute and hit the highlights of some of the most important things Lauren said to make sure that you don't miss them. Now, when we were talking about the decision-making process that goes into whether or not you turn your travel hobby into a full-fledged business, Lauren said, you don't have to take big financial risks. You don't need a lot of capital to get started. If you can keep your operating overhead really, really low at first, you don't need to go and spend $20,000 on a fancy website. That's not what gets people to book with you right now. It's because you're offering something amazing. But Lauren really hit the nail on the head here. Too many people think that they can't get into business because they don't have the cash to launch out big and do something amazing. But one of the beautiful things about tourism is that it is such a low overhead business. And I love her insight here that people aren't booking with you, especially at first, because you have amazing branding, because you have a deeply researched name, but because you have a slick website or anything like that. They're booking with you probably because they know you and they trust you and they know you're going to deliver an amazing travel experience. So what should you do as a brand new travel entrepreneur? Well, you should focus on those amazing experiences. And then all that other stuff is going to come with time as your profit grows. Lauren also put a lot of emphasis on profit. She said it's really important to know before a trip starts what your gross profit is going to be. And she said, gross profit is everything when it comes to tour companies. Knowing your gross profit for each trip will help you know how much you need to charge. That is super important because pricing is maybe one of the most difficult things to do, certainly in the tour business, probably in any business. But I love her framework here of starting with how much money you need and then pricing based on that. And if the pricing doesn't work, well, that means you don't need to launch the trip, or maybe you don't need to launch the business, and that's perfectly okay. Now, when we were talking about the seasonality of tourism and how this presents cash flow challenges, Lauren said the way to think about this is to ask yourself, how do you make sure you have enough at the end of a high season to get to the end of the next high season? She said one of the names for this system is a hill and valley fund, and you just kind of stash money away. She said, don't feast because you know there's a valley coming. Set aside the amount of money you're going to need and pace it out. That way you're not making decisions based on the number that's in the bank today. You're actually planning and budgeting and strategizing, and that's going to create a lot more consistency. I love this approach, and knowing this can save tourism entrepreneurs a ton of heartache. The amount of cash you have in the bank today can be a misleading figure. Now, obviously, if it's lower than the amount you thought you had, that's a problem and you need to look into it. But having large cash reserves today doesn't always mean you're going to be solvent 3 months from now or 6 months from now if you're not thinking about your ongoing overhead. So I would highly encourage you to get on one of these hill and valley funds, to talk to a financial coach like Lauren or someone like her who can help you really forecast and plan for not only that seasonal revenue, but also those ongoing expenses so you don't accidentally feast too much and then find yourself in a dangerous famine when you are in between busy seasons. And finally, when we were talking about managing revenue that comes in installments, Lauren said you need to open a separate bank account just for deposits. She said you don't need to spend any money out of that bank account. And then once that money is earned, you can then move some of that money into your operating account. She said if the money is still refundable, you don't get to spend it yet. She said I wouldn't consider it as revenue until it's actually earned. Now, you guys, I can't tell you how many tour companies, including some big legitimate tour companies, have gotten into trouble by spending customer cash before it's earned. So I think Lauren is absolutely right. If you can instill the discipline to put that cash in a separate account and not touch it until the deposit has been earned, until it's non-refundable, until you have to start paying vendors for the trip that the money has been deposited on, and not pay vendors for some other trip you're operating for other people. If you can do that, you are going to eliminate this temptation that could get you in big financial trouble later. Great advice there from Lauren Rilling. Well, I have been spending the past couple of weeks planning my travel for the second half of this year, looking at some of the tourism conferences and events that I'll be attending. And as I do that, I've been struck by the high price of hotel rooms at nearly all of these events. I remember the days when paying $150 was a lot for a hotel room. Now I'm finding that at these events, the host hotels are going for $250, $300, $350 a night. Some places are now requiring minimum stays, like 3-night minimums, in order to get those discounted group rates. There's one conference where once you total up taxes and fees and all of that, I'm actually paying over $400 a night to be at this event. And that got me to thinking, is there something wrong in the way we are pricing tourism industry events and the accommodations at them? That's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the show where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered views on an issue that impacts tourism every day. Today, I'm asking the question, have tourism conferences become too expensive? So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. The cost of attending tourism conferences is getting out of control. Now, I understand that hotel rates have gone up across the board. But what I don't understand is why tourism conferences are being held in such expensive cities and at the most expensive properties in those destinations. Now, this is a problem that could have long-term negative implications for our industry's future. Because bringing new blood and new entrepreneurs and new companies into the tourism community is one of the most pressing needs facing tourism today. But how exactly are newcomers supposed to get involved if they can't even afford a couple of nights at a conference hotel? From where I sit, major tourism organizations should be more focused on maximizing conference access than maximizing conference revenue. To do that, though, they need to find some cheaper hotel options. Well, that's the Hot Minute. That's how I see things anyway. Of course, as always, you are welcome to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. That is, unless, of course, you disagree about the Fig Newtons. In that case, well, you're simply wrong. At any rate, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can send your thoughts, questions, or vouchers for free hotel stays to podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every email that comes into that address. I really do love hearing from you. And hey, you never know. Your ideas might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And hey, while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Would you go to your favorite podcast playing app? And if you haven't already subscribed to the show, go ahead and do that now. And while you're there, if you would give us a rating and leave us a review, that would be super helpful. I am so thankful to everybody who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Lauren Rilling for joining us today. On the next episode, I'm going to bring you a fascinating conversation with Shannon Stowell of the Adventure Travel Trade Association. Who's going to talk all about making adventure travel accessible to everyone. You're not going to want to miss that. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Our creative team includes Danya Simmons, Ashley Ricks, and Rachel Crick. Our sales manager is Talisa Reck. To advertise on the podcast, call Talisa at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information about our magazines, podcasts, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com.